Hello, my name is Mrs. Cargill, and this is day 4 of lesson 6. Your bell ringer today is, why is agriculture on cleared rainforest soil unattainable? Please record your answer. So today we're going to be going over lesson 6.3, what are the major types of marine ecosystems? There are a few different things that we are going to be covering today. First, we will be defining aquatic life zones and explaining the difference between marine and freshwater life zones. Next, we'll look at the differences between the euphotic zone and the Bethel zone of the ocean. Lastly, we'll look at the causes of ocean acidification. Here are your key terms. Just take a few moments to look over them. I'll be explaining them in detail as we come across each term in the upcoming slides. Our blue planet is covered by ocean water. About 71% of the planet is covered by ocean water. Now, oceans provide us with vital ecosystem services. And remember that ecosystem services are just things or services that ecosystems provide to us. They can be things like fish, right? The ocean provides us with fish. We eat fish from the ocean. The ocean also provides us with oxygen because of all the photosynthetic organisms that produce oxygen in the ocean. The ocean also provides us with recreational activities and aesthetic pleasure. So all of these things can be thought of as ecosystem services. Now, the ocean is really one continuous body of saltwater, but we can divide it up into 4 oceans: the Arctic, the Atlantic, the Indian, and the Pacific. So now we're talking about aquatic life zones, and aquatic life zone is just an area of water that can support life. Aquatic life zones can be saltwater or freshwater. And we want to think about how aquatic life is really dependent on the amount of salinity, the salinity of your water system. Okay, and salinity just means salt. How much salt is in that water? Some organisms are very tolerant of salty water, and some organisms are very intolerant of salty water. And depending upon whether an organism is tolerant or intolerant of salt water, that is going to determine where they can live. Saltwater environments are going to contain different marine life zones, and a marine life zone is just a region that contains characteristic organisms that are going to interact with one another and their environment. These life zones include estuaries, coastal wetlands, bays, shorelines, coral reefs, and mangrove forests. You might be familiar with some of these terms. We're going to look at some of these in detail in the upcoming slides. The number and variety of organisms found in an aquatic area depends on its conditions. And these can be abiotic conditions, which are non-living factors or non-living conditions like temperature or dissolved oxygen, or they can be biotic conditions, which are biotic means living, so maybe availability of food or maybe competition in an area. So just remember that the number and variety of organisms is going to depend on conditions like temperature, dissolved oxygen content, availability of food, availability of light, and availability of nutrients needed for photosynthesis. The coastal zone is one of your key terms, and the coastal zone is just the warm, nutrient-rich, shallow water found from the high tide mark to the gently sloping edge of the continental shelf. It accounts for less than 10% of the world's ocean's area, but it contains 90% of marine species. It also contains some marine life zones like estuaries, coastal marshes, mangrove forest, and coral reefs. So these are very active areas of the ocean full of different species, very biodiverse. Estuary is your next key term, and an estuary is just where a river meets the sea. It's partially enclosed body of water where the salt water mixes with fresh water. It's an in-between environment, sometimes we call it that, and it has brackish water. Now, brackish water is one of your key terms, and brackish water is just a mix of fresh water and salt water. So the salt level in an estuary is going to be somewhere between that of fresh water and that of salt water. Estuaries are often associated with coastal wetlands. These are coastal land, so it's land along the coastline that are covered with water for all or for part of the year. These are some of Earth's most productive ecosystems, and they are extremely, extremely important. One of the main services that coastal wetlands provide is water filtration. So as water moves over these areas, it's going to slow down, right? It's going to be moving a little bit slower, and it's going to get filtered out. So some of the toxic pollutants, maybe some excess plant nutrients, like we talked before about fertilizer runoff, okay, nutrients from fertilizer runoffs, so and sediment, it's going to get filtered out in these areas. Coastal wetlands are also going to provide food habitats and nursery sites for many different types of animals. Now we're getting to the zones of the open sea. The open sea is the beginning of a sharp increase in water depth at the edge of the continental shelf. It separates the coastal area from the large ocean volume. The first zone is called the euphotic zone, and it is the brightly lit upper zone. In this zone is where sunlight is able to penetrate through, and it's going to contain phytoplankton, large, fast-swimming predatory fish like sharks, bluefin tuna, and swordfish. Remember that phytoplankton are producers, and they make tons of oxygen for us. The next zone is the Bethel zone, and it's the dimly lit middle zone. I've heard it called the twilight zone before, so if you want to think about it like that, it's going to contain smaller fish. The last zone is the abyssal zone. This is the deepest, dark, it's cold zone. It contains squid, mussels, deep sea jellyfish, things like this, but basically things that are going to be able to survive without any sunlight. So they're not going to be producers down here using sunlight to make oxygen. What you are going to get in the abyssal zone and the Bethel zone too, you're going to get organisms that have died up in the euphotic zone, drifting down into these zones, and it's going to provide nutrients for the organisms down in these lower zones. So, how do humans impact marine ecosystems? Humans affect marine ecosystems in negative ways. The areas that are going to be most affected include coastal marshes, coral reefs, shorelines, and mangrove forests. Coral reefs are some of the most affected. Coral reefs are actually what we can call indicator species because they are very sensitive, and if something goes wrong, if our coral reefs start getting sick or dying, we know that something is going on with the ocean. Something is going wrong with the ocean system. Something about that, the ocean conditions are changing. So coral reefs are equivalent of the rainforest on land with incredible diversity. And one thing you might have heard of is coral bleaching. So again, with this theme that coral reefs are indicator species, coral bleaching occurs when water temperatures warm and the corals will actually bleach. They will turn white and basically they're very, very sick. And there's not a good chance that these coral reefs are going to get better once they have bleached. Ocean acidification also is going to threaten coral reefs at alarmingly high rates. Rising ocean acidification is caused by rising levels of acidity in ocean waters. And how that happens is actually by the ocean absorbing carbon dioxide. So we create carbon dioxide when we burn fossil fuels, and the ocean absorbs 25% of the carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere by human activities. Carbon ions form the shells and skeletons of marine organisms. So, like shells are going to be made out of carbon, but when they are in a slightly more acidic environment, which happens with ocean acidifications, those shells are going to break down. And you can actually model this at home. If you get a cup and you put some water and some white vinegar in it, and then drop a seashell into the cup, leave it there for a day and then maybe 2 days, check on it each day and see what happens to that shell. Okay, go ahead and pause this video presentation. Click on the link to this video to learn more about coral reefs. When you're done with the video, come back to this video presentation. And your exit ticket for today is, how does ocean acidification affect coral reefs? Go ahead and record your answer and ask your teacher how you should submit your work. All right, so this brings us to the end of day 4. I enjoyed getting to be here with you guys today. Have a great day. Goodbye.